who I knew from back in my days in the Pacific Coast League, Ed Farmer, who was the longtime voice of the Chicago White Sox, who recently died, and his broadcast partner, Darren Jackson, will join us. And I'm working on some other stuff for the other half hour.
So cool. All right, I want to talk a lot about Fans for the Cure, but before we do that, I want to touch base a little bit about the whole situation with baseball, because you are my guru of baseball. You've seen the owner's proposition, and the union is looking at it. Ed, what do you think? What do you think if you can say this? Your thoughts on the proposal?
Well, the proposal was the technicalities. It was not any of the financials, and the financials is the one item, significant as it is, that could trip everything up. They talked about installing a universal DH, the size of the rosters, and the play of baseball, the playing of baseball. They did not get to what has been leaking out, which is that they want the players to do a revenue share. And the players, I think, will do a revenue share approximately 15 minutes after the first pig flies out of LaGuardia Airport. So I don't think that that's going to happen, and that could be a major problem.
Rob, we're going to go to break.
We are indeed. We're going to take a break here on the Clubhouse. We'll continue with the great Ed Randall, Dave Toromio here, Mark Jeffers, myself, Bob Small as well, as we continue on the Clubhouse for a Wednesday. 1490 AM, 105.5 FM, WGCH.com. We'll be right back.
And is there anything else you want to, we're obviously going to talk.
Saturday, we're going to pay tribute to my dear friend, who right back.
Can I talk?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, so we're going to come back and ask a couple more questions on the current baseball situation, and then I want to talk a little about Fans for the Cure. Is there anything else you would like to promote, or we can just?
No, that's fine. I'm going to start my own podcast shortly, but I have no details yet. I'm still working on that.
Okay, cool.
From the beach to the backcountry, education, recreation, or politics, learn all about it on Greenwich Matters. Every Thursday night from 6 to 8 p.m. on 1490 WGCH.
Is Tony still doing that morning show on WGCH?
Welcome back to the Clubhouse. 717. Rob, Dave, Mark, Ed, and Bob. A full house tonight. Peter Botte to join us in a little bit, Mark.
We're just talking with Ed about his thoughts on the proposal, and I completely agree with you. The real question is, Ed, do you think there'll be baseball in 2020?
I really don't know. I've been asked that question many times, and I'm very concerned. There's a couple of things that nobody discusses here, which is with regard to the return of the game. Number one is, who wants to rush into a stadium with 40,000 other strangers? That's number one. Number two, we're looking at perhaps a 15 to 25% unemployment rate. Who's going to pay those prices to go watch a regular season baseball game if we're in such dire financial straits as a nation? And that's something nobody's talking about here. The owners want to get back because they want their television money, and the players and the owners, as we know, have already negotiated one deal, but it was predicated on that there would be fans in the stands. It doesn't look like there's going to be fans in the stands. Now we have Governor Newsom in California basically shutting down the state for another 3 months. We've got the governor of Ohio, a Republican, who has said basically we're not going to have Cleveland Indians and Cincinnati Reds for the foreseeable future. And at what point in time do you say, you know what, we're not going to have a credible season? And 82 games, I think, is 81 games is, or 82 games is really cutting it as close as we can, because we've never had a season of less than 100 games.
Yeah, that's gonna. it's going to be tough. And the other thing is, and if they do come back, and you've been, covering games for, zillion years. Sorry, but will it be able to work with no fans in the stands?
I don't know. Well, it's going to have to. And whether or not they've talked about they may pipe in sound. They're certainly not going to go as far as we see in Korea with those dopey mannequins in the stands.
Well, I think that's silly. I'm sorry.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But if it means, we've heard so many people say that for the morale of the country, it would be great to have baseball. There's no argument about that. But we are our history, and to have a season which is only 80 or so games, and I don't understand why that's such a small number. I agree with Scott Boras, the famous agent. I think we could play 100, 120 games, and I really think that we should be playing double headers every Sunday. To increase the number of games. Then you have an injury factor here. You had pitchers that were 70 to 80% on their way to being season ready when we shut down. Now they've got to start again. There's the real issue, and Dr. Chris Ahmad, who's the Yankees team physician, was quoted the other day as saying he's very concerned about an explosion of Tommy John surgeries, that these guys have to ramp up again. And on top of that is there's not going to be a minor league season. So if there are injuries, you can have your taxi squad, but of certain number of players, where are they going to play to stay ready? There's an incredible number of problems here.
Yeah. That's the exact question I've been wondering: is where will the taxi squad players be?
Guys know about how you guys know how Cashman used the roster the last 2 or 3 years. Guys practically passing each other on Route 80 after pitching a game in the Bronx, and then driving back to Scranton after the game, and then another guy comes up, and they've been doing that for 3 years.
That's so true. All right, I have to change topic for a second. We always come back to baseball because that's what we're, this is a big baseball show in your honor. But Ed, back in the year of 2003, you founded Fans for the Cure. And, I've been associated helping you a little bit. And I know you've done the major minor league ballparks with the things you've been doing. But you survived prostate cancer. And this charity is such an important one. And it's dedicated to the proposition of promoting awareness of the disease and the life-saving value of early detection. Can you tell our audience, first of all, how is the organization doing during this tough times? And, more information about Fans for a Cure.
Well, as far as right now, we had a gala scheduled for September 17th in Manhattan. We were going to honor Mariano Rivera. We expected the proceeds to exceed those of our last gala, which was last June in 2019, when we honored Phil Simms and Joseph Aboud, the noted fashion designer, as well as we always honor a doctor, and we honored Dr. James McKiernan, the chair of the urology department at Columbia Presbyterian in Manhattan, who has been a great friend of the charity. So the gala goes away until 2021, and we are just using this time, as tragic as it is that we all find ourselves where we find ourselves, to be able to catch up on a lot of major initiatives that the charity needs to do. And we had a calendar full of free prostate cancer screenings, prostate cancer seminars scheduled for March and April and May. And we are taking this time to reschedule those. We can't have a date yet because nobody knows when this is going to end, but we're hoping that when this finally abates and we can come out of our home safely, that we will be able to hit the ground running with a number of very important life-saving events.
Oh, that's very cool. That is great. All right, so tell our audience before we forget, because I always forget these things. Where can they learn more about Fans for the Cure?
Well, we have a terrific website at fansforthecure.org. And we like to tell people that we help men recognize the risks of prostate cancer. That's what we're in business for, and the immense value of early detection in both extending and saving their lives. There's an almost 99% cure rate if prostate cancer is detected early. You can find that on our website at fansforthecure.org. As I mentioned, we coordinate PSA screenings. We sponsor medical seminars. We offer physician and hospital referrals. If anybody in the audience is having a prostate issue, and please God, don't let it be cancer, but even if it is, and you need a doctor and you need a hospital, we're happy to help you out. We're the place to come to.
That's terrific, Ed.
I also wanted to mention, I mentioned a moment ago that there's not going to be minor league baseball this year. I'm fairly certain. And that's a big loss for the charity, because I spent 7 years in minor league baseball, and I have hundreds of friends throughout the game. And we are Fans for the Cure. It's an official charity of minor league baseball, designated as such by Pat O'Connor, the chief executive of minor league baseball, back in 2009 at the baseball winter meetings in Indianapolis that December. And there's only three other official charities: ALS Foundation, Special Olympics Boys and Girls Clubs, and ourselves. And last year we were in 121 minor league ballparks in 39 states, handing out our life-saving materials. And over the last, that was 13 years now we've done that. And we've been in more than 1,200 ballparks. And it saddens me that we will not have the opportunity to be able to do that this year, apparently.
And considering the work that you're doing, I mean, I'm sorry, Rob, but are there any grants or anything of that nature that you guys can apply for?
Yeah, we're in the midst of applying for one of the PPPs, and the word that we're hearing is that it looks like we're going to get one of those, and that will be very helpful for us going forward.
Ed, I was just going to add that minor league baseball means so much to these communities too. Some of these towns, it's such a big part of what they are.
Oh my God! I mean, having spent 7 years in the minor leagues, my heart and soul is in the minor leagues. And you take a guy that I know up in the Salem Kaiser volcanoes in Salem, Oregon, and this guy Jerry Walker has been there 24 years. Prior to which he spent 7 years in Bellingham. He was in Bellingham, Washington, which is just north of Seattle, when Griffey started. After he signed, they sent him to Bellingham. 31 years for a guy like this. These guys are lifers, and you're ripping these teams out of there. What's crazy is that here the commissioner, as you all know, makes a statement at the baseball winter meetings. He wants to reduce the minor leagues by 42 teams. Which of course was met with a lot of anger and on the part of minor league owners and operators and people, the thousands of people who, I wanted to be a Major League Baseball play-by-play broadcaster, and on a few occasions I got an opportunity to do so. And I went to the minor leagues. I started for free in Elmira, New York, and then eventually made $3 a game, and I worked in the Pacific Coast League. And those kids that are who want to be the next Ed Randall, and I don't mean that they even know who I am, but I'm just saying they're going down there to ply their craft, to make their mistakes, to improve themselves, so that then they can possibly get an opportunity to go to the major leagues. That now is not going to happen. So here you have a situation where the commissioner stipulates, I want to cut the minor leagues by 42 teams. Well, you know what? Along comes the coronavirus, and that they're going to do it for them, because there's going to be a ton of teams that are going to go out of business. There is no television revenue for the minor leagues. It's all about ticket sales. It's all about advertising. And they've spent thousands of dollars on bobbleheads and stuff like that to give away this year, and now they're stuck.
Right on the money. Can't say it any better myself. Mark, I think we got another break coming up here. So we'll do that.
We'd love you to hang out with us for the next few minutes if you wouldn't mind.
Not at all. Double the pay. I'll be there.
Okay.
There you go. Ed's staying with us. Peter Botte to join us. Dave's still here. So is Bob. And what the heck, I'll stick around for another half hour. We'll continue on the Clubhouse. 1490 AM, 105.5 FM, and WGCH.com. We'll be right back.
the first person to survive.
Hey, Ed, to answer your question, I think, Rob, or Bob can answer this question. I think Tony was still working at GCH.
Oh, yeah. And today's his birthday, in fact.
I did his show 3 times because we did free screenings at Greenwich Hospital. Bill Brown, one of the doctors there, is on our medical advisory board.
Yeah, Tony's a good man.
Yep. When I was at GCH, he was at a different place. It wasn't where it is now.
Right.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah. Actually, that's how I became an Islander fan.
Oh, I love
the public relations director of the
Don't tell Dave that. Oh my God.
Here we go.
The Islander public relations guy came into the radio station one day. His name was Hawley Chester III. And
welcome back to the Clubhouse. Glad you're along with us for this Wednesday edition. Rob, Dave, Mark, Ed, Bob, and Peter about to join us. And Mark, we're flying along here.
We are indeed, and I just saw a handsome man up here, and it wasn't me. I know, I'm just saying, that's on the Zoom. That's on the Zoom part. Yes, it's my pleasure to introduce Peter Botte, who's been writing for the New York sports scene for over 30 years, and is currently writing for the New York Post, and came up with a tremendous book, which I've been lucky enough to take a look at. And as soon as I can find this piece of paper, there it is. The full, the correct title, because it is the Big 50, the New York Yankees, the men and the moments that made the New York Yankees. And Peter, welcome to the Clubhouse.
Hi, guys. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm glad you're joining us. So, Peter, the timing couldn't be better in the sense of something that, baseball fans need to see is your book coming out. But why did you decide? I mean, you didn't decide to write it for this particular thing, but it's been a great. Why did you originally want to write this book?
Well, when I got offered the opportunity to write this book, it's a series by Triumph Books. They've done this, the Big 50 series for other teams in other sports and some in baseball. And they told me that they had been wanting to do a Yankee version of it for a long time. Obviously, to narrow down the history of the Yankees to 50 men and moments was probably the most daunting challenge of writing this book. They sent me some versions of some other teams, and not to denigrate any other teams, but like say the Minnesota Twins, right? The Minnesota Twins, the person who is number 30 on their top 50 probably doesn't crack the top 500 when it comes to the Yankees. So that was the toughest part of it. Like you said, I definitely hope that it can fill some of the void for Yankee fans, baseball fans, sports fans while they're waiting for the games to come back at some point. But I feel like the book can do that. It's really a full 100 years of Yankee history. From the chapter 1 is the trade for Babe Ruth, purchasing his contract from the Red Sox. That's the natural as number 1, and chapter number 50 is the Baby Bombers, and kind of looking ahead and what this young group now needs to do. Aaron Judge, etc., to cement their place in Yankee history. So I feel like I covered a lot of ground. I certainly had to kind of pare it down, leave some significant people and moments out. But what I decided to do was I put all of Babe Ruth's moments into one chapter. I put all of, say, Jeter's moments into one chapter. I combined some of the World Series championships. For instance, 1949 to 1953, they won 5 in a row. I made that all one chapter because there's no way I could do a separate chapter on all 27 championships, all the Hall of Famers, and then still get into the moments like the perfect games and Reggie's 3-homer game and Larson's perfect game and Roger Maris's 61 home runs. Those moments got their own chapters, but I kind of had to pare it down, and it was tough because when I started, I had a list of probably almost or maybe even over 100 men and moments that I felt deserved chapters, and I kind of had to pare it down from there. But I feel like the history of the last century of Yankee history is all there in the book for anybody who's looking to. There's obviously some younger fans maybe who don't know all the specific stories, and there's some good anecdotes in there from different people. You know, even the older players, like I'm not going to break a whole lot of new ground on Ruth and Gehrig and, you know, DiMaggio and the older guys, but I tried to put a fresh spin, talk to some current people looking back on those players specifically. And I feel like there's some fun anecdotes in the book that fans will really enjoy.
Peter, how much did you know of Yankee history coming into this, and what did you learn coming out of this?
Well, I mean, I grew up in New York. I'm 52 years old. I mean, I grew up in a National League house. I'll say that. But I was the Yankee beat writer for a few years in the 90s. So I covered those World Series. I was around. You know, got to spend some time and talk with the older players, you know, such as Yogi Berra, and you know, even got to meet DiMaggio once, which I put in the book was a big thrill for me, because my dad, Italian American, grew up in Brooklyn, was a Dodger fan, but revered DiMaggio, and as a lot of people did. And I talked to a lot of older fans. Chaz Palminteri, the actor, actually wrote one of the forwards for the book with Bernie Williams. And you know, Chaz, it was in the same thing. His father was first generation Italian American. That's how he became a diehard Yankee fan. His father was a DiMaggio guy, and Palminteri was a huge Mickey Mantle fan in the 50s and 60s. And I got that from a lot of different people that I spoke to. Tried to speak to people who were fans of those 50s. People like Bob Costas, people like Larry David from Seinfeld and Curb Your Enthusiasm actually have a chapter in the book about the Yankees' involvement in the Seinfeld show, and that was a lot of fun to speak to Larry David about that. And that was a lot of fun to go through with him. He was great, very insightful, and as you know him, very funny, and you know, just his interactions with Steinbrenner. You know, he did the voice on the show, and you know, but his interactions with George Steinbrenner to get his approval for certain things was a really interesting conversation that we went through.
Costanza, Calzone.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's funny, you rolled into my next question, Peter, was I wanted, in honor of the great comic actor Jerry Stiller's passing this week, tell us, you know, can you tell our audience a little bit more about the George Costanza part, because it was hilarious, and you know, Stiller played Frank, and it was, you know, a great part of the show, and I think that's a very timely part of the book.
Yeah, one of my favorite Seinfeld scenes of all time is when George Steinbrenner goes to George Costanza's house, his parents' house, and informed them erroneously that he had died. And Frank Costanza, his immediate reaction is, "What the hell did you trade Jay Buhner for?" And the answering machine that he leaves on Jerry Seinfeld's answering machine at the end of that scene, you know, "Jerry, it's Frank Costanza. Mr. Steinbrenner's here. George is dead. Call me back." Great, you know, one of the great scenes in Seinfeld related to the Yankees. Yeah, Jerry Stiller. That was a sad to see that his passing earlier this week. But we got to relive, because of it, though. I feel like we got to relive a lot of those scenes, the videos, and took a deep dive into YouTube yesterday trying to find some of those old clips. But yeah, the Seinfeld chapter for me was a real labor of love. Some people that know me have said to me, you just wrote this book so you could write that one chapter, right?" And I said, and that's 100% true. I mean, look, I love the history of baseball, Yankee history, but when I set out to do the book, I had told myself that I wanted to somehow include George Costanza and the Seinfeld show, because I felt like it was, in the 90s especially, it was such a big part of you know, that generation of Yankee fans. I mean, Derek Jeter, Bernie Williams, Paul O'Neill, Buck Showalter all appeared on the show, and Larry David, as you know, is a huge New York sports fan and a gigantic Yankee fan, a huge Mickey Mantle fan. In the show, George Costanza is based loosely on Larry David, and he at one point wanted to name his firstborn child Seven after Mickey Mantle. So yeah, I did not expect. Wasn't planning to get Larry David. I was when I was able to get him on the phone. I spoke to him for about an hour. He couldn't have been nicer, and couldn't have been more helpful. Just kind of going through the machinations of getting the Yankee approval, you know, to use George Steinbrenner's likeness and the Yankee brand. But they really, they really took it to extremes, the George Steinbrenner caricature that they made. And I found it interesting. I found an old article in the New York Times in the late 90s where George told Ira Berkow of the Times that he didn't know much about the show, but his grandchildren were huge fans of the show, and they kind of pleaded him to do it. And they really ended up loving it. And George kind of found the humor in it. George at one point, they had him come out to California and film a scene with Julia Louis-Dreyfus, and it ended up getting cut from the show. Just Jerry and Larry just didn't think it worked. They liked the idea better of just filming it from behind and having Larry David do the voice. But Larry and Jerry had to call George and tell him that it didn't work, and they had to cut him from the episode that he had filmed. So to be a fly on the wall in those conversations, Larry said he accepted it pretty well. But I just couldn't imagine like having to make that phone call to tell him, Mr. Sider, I know you flew all the way out here to do the show, but we're not going to use the scenes that you filmed because it's just not good. But yeah, the Seinfeld show was such a big part of that era of Yankee history. And Paul O'Neill and Bernie and different people told me just how much fun they had. And Paul O'Neill said to me that just as many people come up to him and tell him that they loved him on Seinfeld than tell him that they love him as an announcer or love him playing for the Yankees. So I find that really interesting. You forget sometimes that there's millions of people that aren't watching baseball every day. I mean, it's maybe hard for us to believe, but that would know him more from a sitcom than know him from being the warrior on those 90s Yankees teams.
So you mentioned Chaz earlier, but then Williams also wrote a foreword for the book. Tell us a little bit about that, because our younger audience will love that Bernie was involved as well.
I feel like Bernie, and I've always said that I've felt that when they talk about the core four, that Bernie should be right there with him, whether you call it a Fab Five. I know he arrived earlier than those guys, and I know he didn't stick around for 2009. But you see it now. You see how beloved Bernie is whenever he comes back to the stadium. He gets as big an ovation, really, as Mariano or Jeter, maybe more so. He gets I feel like sometimes he gets the biggest ovation of that era of those teams, which is hard to believe. But he's so beloved by the fans. So when I had asked him, I had interviewed him for the book, and I asked him, I was talking to him and his manager who handles all his music appearances. And I said, look, we would love to have Bernie involved, just because he's such a cerebral guy. He has such good insights. He's had such a second life since retiring from baseball. So when he agreed to do the forward, to pair that with Chaz Palminteri, I feel like it really adds so much to the book, because Bernie takes us through those early 90s when he first showed up at, kind of the precursor to the championship teams. And, people forget too that, Bernie almost left in 98 after the 98 season as a free agent. He came really close to signing with Boston until he appealed to George Steinbrenner, and they ended up working out a contract. But Bernie was kind of the test case for the Yankees holding on to their young players. We think of it now with the core four guys all coming through the system, but Bernie was really the first one when George was on suspension and Stick was kind of running the show. They gave Bernie a chance to grow into that role. I mean, he might not have been ready for it in 1991, 1992, but by 1996, he was as big a part of those teams as anyone. And the way that Bernie kind of blossomed was a testament to Stick, Michael, and Buck Showalter and their patience with him. Because let's face it, and we talk about this in the Seinfeld chapter. The Yankees and George Steinbrenner didn't have a great history of developing their own young players in the 80s. Certainly, the laundry list of guys. We mentioned Jay Buhner as one of the guys that got traded away, but Jose Rio and Doug Drabeck and Willie McGee and Fred McGriff. I mean, guys who went on to All-Star, MVP, Cy Young careers. Never got a chance to make it to the Yankees. They were always traded away before that. Bernie was really the first one that got held onto, and I think that's a big reason why they stuck with Mariano and Jeter and Posada and Pettit when they had.
We'll take a break.
Hey, Peter, we're going to come right back after this commercial.
Okay.
Hey, Ed, are you on?
I'm here.
So, Peter, we have
Yeah.
Ed Randall's on with us, too.
Hey, Ed, what's up, Ed? How are you?
Hey, how are you? Thanks for the book, buddy.
Oh, did you end up getting it?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, great.
Yeah, thank
Have you had a chance to look through it at all?
I'm about to.
Okay, great. Well, definitely let me know what you think.
I will.
So when we come back, I want to ask you some other questions, Peter. And Ed, you can chime in whenever you'd like. Talk a little bit about the quarantine, Peter, when, the columns you were writing for people or help it. I took some of your notes down. So we'll come back to that as well.
Sure.
Good news about your reopening schedule. We'll help you create custom 30-second announcements at 1/3 off our regular advertising rates with a minimum 2-week contract for the discount. Put your business back on the map. Call Rocco Fort at 203-869-1490, extension 104.
Thanks for hanging out with us on the Clubhouse for a Wednesday. Rob Adams, Dave Toromio, Mark Jeffers. Ed Randall's still with us. Peter Botte here. Bob Small in the studio. And, of course, we're with you on WGCH and all of our affiliates. I can say that, Mark. That's so cool to say.
It is nice. We've Sports Byline's been very kind to pick us up, and Armed Forces Network has us on as well. So yeah, our audience is growing. I think it's because of guests like Peter is going to help us draw, and of course Ed. So yeah, we're excited about that. All right, so I'm going to open up things a little bit. We're going to come back to the book in a second, Peter, but I want to ask you, and then Ed can chime in as well. When you were writing a column for the Post, and it was I thought so valuable to people, sports fans. We're quarantined, we're at home, we're locked down a little bit, and your column was basically, here's some great sports movies that you can watch. And you know what? I took notes and actually looked at a lot of them, and also some television series as well. But tell our audience a little bit about some of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, when the shutdown first started in the kind of the beginning of March, we were looking just like everybody else. We were looking for content, and there's no games, there's nothing to cover. So one of the ideas that my editors and I had was to give like a daily recommendation of a sports book or movie or TV show, that meant a lot to me. And maybe it was before the time of some of, the younger readers or maybe just kind of slipped through the cracks of people's viewing. So I tried to mix it up as best as I could. I didn't just throw out there just all the home run big, the biggest movies and stuff. I tried to use some more obscure ones, ones that I really like. Movies like the cycling movie Breaking Away from the 1970s was a great one. The Hustler with Paul Newman and Jackie Gleason from the 60s, and then obviously 25 years later, The Color of Money, which Newman won an Oscar for. And I tried to get into all the different baseball movies, The Natural and Bull Durham, and tried to mix it up as much as I could. I did one column ranking all 9 of the Rocky movies. That caused some good debate. I took a little heat because I made Rocky IV not the second to last on my list. It's just a little too propagandish for me, but I know people love it, and for me, Rocky IV is lucky that they made Rocky V, or else it would have been last. But so many great movies and TV shows. I love the current show that just ended, Brockmire with Hank Azaria. I was a huge fan of The White Shadow back in the 70s and early 80s. Friday Night Lights obviously was a big one. I tried to get in some books like The Boys of Summer and a couple of the Muhammad Ali biographies that are out there, and Bill Belichick, Vince Lombardi. Like, those are the kind of books that I read, that I like to read. I'm fascinated by those type of people. So I tried to mix it up and do as many, movies, from in the various sports. I tried to mix it up. I got some hockey in there with obviously Slapshot. I did some documentaries. I listed my top 10 favorite ESPN 30 for 30 documentaries, which was a fun one for me. So there's a lot of, I mean, there's so much content that people could be viewing. I know people are, forcing themselves to watch old replays of games and things like that. Hopefully it won't be too much longer before we can get some live action and be able to see stuff. But in the meantime, there's literally hundreds and hundreds of books and movies and TV shows that you could binge, while you're waiting for sports to come back.
Well, a big fan of our Clubhouse show that we've had on the show a number of times is Lacey Underall, Cindy Morgan, and I know that movie Caddyshack was one of your favorites. So we applaud you for that.
Yeah, Caddyshack is definitely in my wheelhouse. That's one of my favorites. Just what it did to launch the careers of Bill Murray and Chevy Chase, and even Rodney Dangerfield, who was in his 50s at the time. That was his first major movie role. He had just been obviously a stand-up comedian for years, Johnny Carson show. But that role really kind of vaulted him into stardom, and obviously he made some movies after that. But for me, Caddyshack might be the most quotable sports movie that's ever been made. Certainly from my generation, it's right up there with some of the funniest certainly sports movies that ever have been made.
So go ahead.
No, I would just say I just agree with that, and I would say I'm glad that it sounds like there's a lot of entertainment spin here. Peter, Dave Toromio here. I just wanted to. I don't really have a question for you. I just want to say congratulations on a great career. I saw, I'm an Islanders fan, so there's a lot of things, and a Mets fan, by the way. But I will read the book, and I will say this: since there's a lot of entertainment talk here, and hopefully the show Everybody Loves Raymond, and Raymond was a sports writer, but the publisher rejected his book. And all I can remember is Frank Barone saying to him, "It's the Yankees. How could you screw that up?"
Right. Exactly. Ray Barone, I'm a huge fan of the show, but when we talk about sports writers, Ray Barone, I don't think he ever went to work. He was doing a lot of work in the basement or whatever, but didn't, to me, it didn't really hit home with what you see with most, the extent of the travel that most sports writers have to do. But I will say that I was a huge fan of that show, even if that part of it didn't really ring true for me.
Right.
Peter, we asked Ed earlier in the show. I want to just touch base on your thoughts on the baseball, the owners and the players and the whole, not necessarily controversy, but opening up baseball. What was your thoughts on what's going to happen?
Look, I've been one of the kind of err on the side of caution people. I don't think they should open it up too quickly. But I don't know that they've come up yet with the right solution for this. There's some areas that really, frankly, aren't able to open up right now, and you couldn't have home games in certain parts of the country. But then again, the quarantining Arizona proposal, for me I didn't think that would be an easy sell to the players, to kind of all be holed up in hotels and not be able to go out at all and just kind of play baseball and then go back to the hotel. I don't know that the players are going to want to do that. So look, I feel like we all want this to happen as soon as possible, but I feel like they can't force it. If they can figure out a way to get the testing at a level where they can test these players and all the essential workers at the stadiums, test them regularly and be able to pull it off, I mean, that's great. If they can get a half a season out of it, that's great. But the question becomes, if the virus comes back at the end of the summer and the fall and they have to shut down again, it kind of defeats the whole purpose of doing it. I hope they can work it out. I hope the Players Association and the owners can come to an equitable agreement. Nobody wants to hear anybody gripe about money or anything like that when it comes to a situation like this. But I still think they have some hurdles that they have to cross before we can get this etched in stone and get this up and running.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. On the table, any other comments on that one? Because I agree with you, Alex, on that.
I think it's hard to see where we're going to be able to find the perfect situation. So I think to Peter's point, I think we have to continue to kind of nudge this forward until we can come up with the right situation for everybody. And I should mention, Peter's a great Twitter follow. He's on Twitter at Peter, Botte. I follow him. I've read your stuff for years. Obviously terrific, and I hope we're all right back on the field and working really soon.
Yeah, me too. I mean, that's obviously that's the end goal for everybody here, right? But you know, we can't. My feeling from the beginning has been we can't rush this. We have to get it right, because if we restart everything too soon and then have to shut it down and start over at square one, then what are we going to do then? So I would certainly be on that side of the fence. I know some people disagree with me and will just want to get it started as soon as possible. You know, but I feel like they have to get it right. They have to listen to the medical advice, listen to what the doctors are saying, and you know, and hopefully we can get everybody back on the field and back to some sense of normalcy, you know, relatively soon.
All right, I want to return back to the book for a second, because Peter, you might like to return back to the book. Just
Sure,
kidding.
that was great.
All right, so 1998 Yankees. I'm a Yankee fan. I wore the hat for you because, you know, Ed gave me a little trouble saying you really shouldn't be wearing, you know, you should be a neutral. But, you know, I'm a Yankee fan. So I 100% agree with that. Your theory that the 1998 Yankees are the best overall team in baseball history. I've got colleagues here on the table that might disagree, but I'm going to say yes. And Peter, you can, your point, and Dave, you may want to chime in and say Ed or Rob may disagree, but I agree with that concept.
I mean, look, I mean, it's hard to compare eras and generations. Obviously, the 1927 Murderers Row Yankees certainly have been hailed as the greatest team of all time for several years. My feeling with the 98 Yankees, I was a beat writer that year and covered them from, you know, beginning to end, from the first day of spring training until the clinching game against the Padres in the World Series. So I feel like I have a pretty good perspective on it, but I never saw a team in any sport. I know there have been 72, 73 win teams in the NBA, and, you know, Patriots went a whole season without losing in the regular season before falling to the Giants in the Super Bowl. Just wanted to get that in there. But
I want my Giants next week, Peter. Thank you.
Oh, there you go. But that 98 Yankee team was incredible. And people forget that they started out 1-4 that year. And Steinbrenner was actually, people think it's like an overreaction, but he was going crazy. He literally called Cashman back. They had started the season on the West Coast, and he had called Cashman back back to Tampa off the road trip. He pulled him off. It was Cashman's first year as GM. He pulled him off the road trip, 4 or 5 games into that season. And basically, Cashman thought he was getting fired. It was his first season as GM, and, you know, Cashman thought he was in trouble. Stick Michael went to bat for him. And then, you know, the Yankees turned around. They had a team meeting in Seattle, and they went on this crazy tear for the next 6 months, really, to finish with 114 wins. And then they went 11-2 in the postseason. Almost, you know, they kind of had a scare against Cleveland in the ALCS. They fell behind 2-1. Knobloch had the play where he didn't go pick up the ball. That was kind of rolling away. He was arguing with the umpire. But they turned around. El Duque, you know, who I feel like doesn't get enough credit on those championship teams for being, I feel like he was the ace of those teams, especially in the postseason. His postseason numbers are incredible. I put them up there with Schilling or anybody, really. But that 98 team was really a machine. I mean, they won. As a writer covering a team like that, it was almost hard to do, because you had to come up with a new way to write the Yankees won 7-1 every day. You had to do that almost every day. They had stretches. They had a road trip like to Kansas City and Minnesota during that season where they won like every game by like 5 runs. It's almost not fun to cover a thing like that, because the story is essentially the same every day. You know, change a couple of names around. But that team was that was an incredible team, and for me, certainly in my lifetime, that's the best team that I've seen. People can argue the 27 Yankees. There's obviously so many differences in the game between then and 1998, but for me, that 98 Yankee team, you know, was one of the great teams of all time. He had Scott Brosius batting ninth with 100 RBIs.
There you go.
You know,
Peter, we're going to wrap it up, but I want to can tell our audience real quickly where they can pick up the Big 50 New York, where they can order it. The Big 50 New York Yankees, the men and the moments that made the New York Yankees.
The one disappointment of writing a book and not having the bookstores open is you can't go into the bookstores and see it on the shelves. But obviously, in the interim, you can certainly order it wherever you can buy books online, whether that's Amazon.com, Barnes and Noble's website, Triumph Books on their own website sells it directly. Target sells it on its website. So there's, and independent bookstores, you can call them and they might be able to get it for you, and maybe you could arrange to pick it up outside the store, or maybe at some point that they're letting people in with masks or whatever. But there are certainly plenty of places to be able to get the book. And like I said before, I really hope that it can fill some void while we wait for baseball to come back.
Well, we're grateful to Peter Botte, Ed Randall. We'll see you next week for another edition of the Clubhouse. For Mark Jeffers, Dave Toromio, Bob Small, I'm Rob Adams saying good night. Stay safe once again, and we will see you next time on the Clubhouse on 1490 AM, 105.5 FM, and WGCH.com. Good night. All right.
Great.
Are we clear?
Thank you so
We are
much,
clear.
guys, for having me.
Thanks, guys.
Peter, you're welcome.
Peter.
Thank you so much. Ed,
Thanks,
thank
Ed.
you, man. Appreciate you both.
Sure.
Stay
Thank
well,
you.
fellas.
All right, guys.
Be well.
Take care. Thanks very much.
Good night, Peter. Good night, Ed.
Good night, guys.
Good night.
Take care.
All right. Well, here we go.
Are we off,
He's like the Energizer Rabbit.
are we off the air?
Yeah, we're off everything.
We're off.
I've often said that.